I'll take nods and silence as being agreed and pass back to you, Gavin, for next order of business.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I think it was your intention to take the agenda items in order of deputations, as if we were back in the chambers and we had them speaking.
That is correct.
If that's the case, yes, then it takes us to item 8.5. This is the Space for People, East Craigs Low Traffic Neighbourhood. We've had a number of deputations on this item, and we have a coalition amendment, a Conservative amendment and a Liberal Democrat amendment as well.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. There have been 4 written submissions in terms of deputations. I hope people have taken the time, elected members have taken the time to read these in the same way as we would do if we were listening to them live in the chamber. And I'll hand over to Councillor McInnes to propose the paper and the coalition amendment.
Thank you very much, Lord Provost. Clearly, there has been a great deal of discussion around this topic since the proposal was first mooted for a low traffic neighbourhood in East Craigs. I should point out that the original report goes beyond the scope of that particular project into other areas too. We had a very full, detailed discussion at the Transport and Environment Committee, which covered an enormous range of issues related to both the contents of the proposal, the revised proposal which was presented at that time, and the concerns that were emerging from the community. And I think it's important to note that in revising those proposals that were brought forward to the Transport and Environment Committee, there were some very genuine attempts to meet some of the concerns, particularly around, for example, safety of some of the key junction turns onto some of the key roads, as one example that had been raised. I think it's important to note that we also had received very short time before that committee some indication around a challenge on the legality of the proposal, and as a result we have felt it necessary as a council, as we would normally do in situations of this nature, to also seek legal advice around that to clarify our position on that. And it's for that reason that I have proposed the amendment in the form that it's come forward, and which I hope that we can find some agreement on. I think it's very clear that we need to establish, for the purposes of elected members taking decisions, and also, of course, for those who are watching this debate and with some concerns from within the community, we have to establish exactly where we are in terms of the response to that legal challenge. And so, as a result of which, I would like to request officers to provide a summary of that legal advice to members ahead of the next Transport and Environment Committee on the November 12th. And that will allow that full scrutiny from that aspect of the particular project. Clearly, if some of that advice indicates a need for it, we would then bring forward to that committee any further changes that would be required to any designs to ensure that they fit well within that legal framework. I think it's fair to say that we've had an enormous response from the community, much of it in opposition to the plans, some of it in support. I fully recognise the need to discuss with the community exactly what our plans were around that. That's why I attended a major open air meeting and took on board the comments that were made at that meeting and in subsequent and previous correspondence. That's what produced the revised changes that were then debated at TEC. I think it's really important that we recognise the fact that people have to be heard, and that we have in fact been responding, despite the way in which it's been portrayed, that we have not been listening, that we have not responded. I think it's fair to say that we have done so, both in terms of the revised plans that's come forward and our attempt to debate those effectively at Transport and Environment Committee. I am also meeting tomorrow, accompanied, I hope, by the council leader and by my vice convener, to meet with one of the community groups involved in that, in order to both further explain the situation that we're in, why we've reached this particular point, and to, of course, listen further to concerns that are emerging from them post this debate.
1 minute.
Thank you, Lord Provost. On the basis of the two amendments, I'd like to shift then quickly to that. We would like, if we can find agreement across this, I think there's some degree of commonality between the amendments that have been proposed, and so I would like to suggest putting forward my motion and incorporating into that, with the parties' agreement, that we include 1.1 from the Conservative amendment, 1.6 from the Conservative amendment, and 0.1 from the Liberal Democrat group. I think that this is an indication quite clearly of the recognition of the concerns, and that we want to follow through on this in an effective manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McInnes. To second the paper and the coalition amendment, Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Lord Provost. As Councillor McInnes has said, there is no doubt that we've all received a large amount of correspondence on this proposal. It is of the greatest importance that when we are looking at proposals like these, we explore every avenue, and by requesting legal advice, I believe it is right and proper that we do so. I second the coalition motion.
Thank you, Councillor Doran. To move the Conservative amendment, Councillor Webber.
Thanks, Lord Provost. Yes, firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge the conveners accepting points 1.1 and 1.6. However, there's a substantive component of our amendment that she is not willing to accept, and that unfortunately means that we will continue to press on. Because what's really important in ours, and you spoke a lot about the need for there to be a summary of the legal advice, and I'm afraid that's not appropriate. It needs to be a full legal advice, needs to be sought. And the legal opinion that the group has been included as one of the deputations, so it's only 3 pages. And if you so wish, I will reference a couple of this. It talks about the residents were informed of a decision without consultation in August, and in his view, the council is entitled to exercise its power under section 14 of the Traffic Act 1984. It does not tell us anything about the extent of that power in these circumstances. And in my opinion, the extent of the power is informed by the other provisions of the 1984 Act. The principle of administrative law that a discretionary power should not be exercised so as to frustrate the object of the legislation that it's conferred. There's more. As such, emergency steps should, in my view, be the minimum necessary in order to deal with the particular likelihood of the danger to the public that has arisen. It must not go further than the minimum necessary, because that would impinge on the use of TROs and the procedural safeguards built into their use. So a lot is mentioned about the reasonableness and the proportionality of the Council's measures, and it seems to be that the Council is contend that the pandemic is being used as a pretext to force through an unpopular decision that it intends to be permanent via an inappropriate use of temporary powers, and the pretext to make a decision that might otherwise have faced considerable opposition and possibly not have been made. And we know that there's considerable opposition. We can't deny that. We've had them. Our inboxes are flooded. There's been surveys and campaigns going on. We know that this would not go through in any normal circumstance. And we have also asking that it comes back to full council, and that has to be maintained. It's in the public interest for all 62 of us to be involved in that debate. That through the ward members, albeit some are also of the EPIC group, are not involved in the TEC committee, and it's important that they too get to speak on behalf of the residents that they serve. I'm also just, in terms of that, one of our many emails was quite extensive, and I'd like to take words from his contribution in terms of our code of conduct. All right, we have a duty to act in the interests of the council as a whole, and all the communities served by it, and a duty to be accessible to all the people of the area for which you have been elected to serve and to represent their interests conscientiously. You must make decisions solely on merit. You are accountable to the public for your decisions and actions. You have a duty to consider issues on their merits. And similarly, you must respect members of the public when performing our duties. We're not doing that. We are walking into a tunnel with our blinkers on and carrying on regardless of the views that are being expressed so vociferously and so candidly and with such passion and integrity and some really personal stories. So irrespective of the outcome of the legal opinion, nothing should progress. We need to stop what we're doing now, go back to the drawing board and listen and consult constructively with the entire community that's involved here. Anything other than that is not accurate or true. And the other parts in our motion amendment today are quite practical in a sort of conservative sort of way. Why don't we just chop back the trees that are there, improve the footpath and the network of paths that are extensive through this area and make it easy to get around unless they're all in the state of disrepair that they're in. So with that, I really want us to look hard at ourselves. Why are we doing this? Are we doing it for our own agenda, or are we doing it because we're just ignoring the community that are so passionately calling out for our help to stop this from carrying on any further? Please, at this point, just have a look at ourselves and put a stop on what we're doing. And with that, I propose our amendment. Thank you, Lord Provost. I got quite animate there.
Thank you, Councillor Webber. Nothing wrong with that. Councillor Brown to second the amendment.
Thank you, Lord Provost. In many respects, in seconding this Conservative amendment, it's been a real challenge to come up with words and phrases that have not already been said during a 3-month period involving over 1,000 of my constituents sending emails, several virtual sittings of various council committees discussing the matter, petitions, a public meeting, local and national press coverage, and of course a United Ward councillor informed objection to the original proposals back in July. The message to this administration throughout that window has been a simple one: halt and consult. Engage with the community, bring them on board and drink from the fountain of local knowledge and shape a scheme by the people, for the people, that can be future-proofed to take into consideration the wider changes to the local landscape currently taking shape. But no, this minority administration is still tripping over itself in order to plough ahead regardless. Their we know best attitude has resulted in widespread anger and frustration amongst the community. A community that's now delivered one of the biggest, most vocal campaigns that has been seen in recent memory against a council seeking to impose a cobbled up LTN directly linked to a number of drafted permanent proposals and designs put forward pre-COVID. One correspondent within the several hundred of local resident emails that hit councillors' inboxes over the last few days summed up this fiasco rather succinctly. In making our pleas, I have witnessed at first hand the councillors from Coalition display a considerable lack of respect, discourtesy, neglect and nonchalance towards the people of East Craigs, North Gyle, South Craigmount, North Craigmount, Turnhouse, West Craigs, Brookline and Drumbray, and also the local councillors, not from the Coalition, who have stood against the matter. This has been in person via council committee meetings and written correspondence. I have not been told that this is what is best for me, but it's not. And I want to tell you why the council but the council in its various forms is not listening to me. Simply voting in favour of proceeding on this, considering that the TTRO is potentially unlawful, is just simply not plausible. This Spaces for People project, Lord Provost, far from being the unmitigated success some quarters would have us believe, has simply been a cacophony of chaos across the city. From businesses reporting significant downturn in takings to a lack of community engagement, it's fair to say that this council administration has completely lost the changing room. I still can't fathom out how the convener was so sure of the legality of the scheme when these proposals were first laid out. It's turning into a dog's breakfast, and by seeking to send us back to Transport and Environment Committee, This administration sees the community continue to be left in limbo over these unpopular, unwanted proposals. Within our amendment today, we are seeking clarity and common sense. It offers practical, quick-win solutions too, which will make immediate positive impacts on the community to allow for improvements to be made under the Spaces for People programme, to allow people to safely use pavements and the extensive path network in the area. I urge this administration to withdraw these current proposals, consult and bring the community fully on board this journey. Lord Provost, on behalf of my community, I take great pride in seconding this Conservative amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. To move the Liberal Democrat Group amendment, Councillor Aldridge.
Yes, thanks very much, Lord Provost, and I welcome the convener's attempt to try and find consensus here, but what her attempt has done is simply to take the action points out of both the Conservative and the Liberal Democrat amendments. The key point which she has missed is that the community would like the proposals withdrawn forthwith and for them to be consulted from the beginning in devising any medium or longer term traffic solutions for the area, which is what they are, not to keep having to respond to a new set of cobbled together changes which are brought together at very short notice without the community being involved in any consultation about what they should be. Our amendment, Lord Provost, covers more than the legal challenge. And Councillor McInnes, in her introduction, said it was only when they were threatened with a legal challenge that you thought of getting legal opinion. Right from the outset, people were questioning the legality of using the TTRO for this purpose. It was questioned, but there was no threat of legal challenge. And I am shocked that the convener was so insistent that it was legally sound to proceed, but now seems unsure. What was her evidence for doing so? I have no idea. I don't think she has any idea. Lord Provost, I have too much respect for the hundreds of people who have sent personalised emails giving details of how the proposals would impact on their personal and professional lives to ask them to do it all over again at the next Transport and Environment Committee and potentially at the next full council meeting. If you had an iota of respect for them, you would simply leave the trench that you've dug yourselves into, get out, withdraw the proposals and start working with the community rather than against them to draw up proposals that everybody can buy into. Lord Provost, it's a sign of the slightly patronising approach that's been taken throughout this, that there seemed to be a view that the law didn't apply unless you were challenged on it. How on earth would you bring forward proposals without knowing whether it was legal to do so? I think that's a dereliction of duty on behalf of the convener from my point of view. And I'd like to thank the individuals in the neighbourhood who have crowdfunded in order to seek legal opinion to help this council out. And I hope the convener will thank the opposition for bringing about a delay so that the council was not put in a position of potentially breaking the law, so that we've got a chance now to delay and get clear legal action. And I'd like to thank all the individuals who together put in 10, 20, 30, 40 pounds and crowdfunded in order to get the council's opinion, which has led to this change. We've had a lot of responses in our inboxes, and there have been people on both sides, but it's been interesting that those who support the LTN have in general been very general comments about low traffic neighbourhoods being a good thing, and I think we can all agree with that. Or they've been about longer term, medium term traffic movements in the area. Those who have opposed it have to a large extent been talking about the impact the detailed current proposals will have on their ability to go about their lives. A number of people with disabilities, with people with caring responsibilities, people who are key workers, whose work is really important during this COVID emergency, negatively impacted by both the original proposals and these revised ones. So rather than trying to come up with yet another cobbled together set of proposals to save face, why not simply withdraw them, talk to the community, because it is a constructive community. Talk to them and let's work together to find a solution. Because it's clear, Lord Provost, the low traffic neighbourhood has nothing whatsoever to do with the COVID emergency. Everybody knows that. It's been everything to do with trying to get a set of proposals through without going through the normal democratic process. It's clear it's always been intended as permanent. That was put in a leaflet around the community. It's clear it doesn't comply with the criteria for a TTRO and that the legality is questionable. It's clearly a questionable use of public funds which were intended for a specific purpose and which are being used for another purpose.
30 seconds.
And Lord Provost, it's clear that the original proposals were completely unacceptable because they've been withdrawn. The current proposals are unacceptable because they're going to be changed. I would ask the administration, even at this late stage, just to show some genuine leadership, which is to go, actually, we've got it wrong in this case. We'll withdraw the proposals. We'll work with the constructive members of the community and let's come up with some proposals that we can all unite behind for a good, safe, clean, environmentally friendly neighbourhood. I move the Liberal Democrat amendment.
Thank you. To second the Liberal Democrat amendment, Councillor Lang.
Yes, thank you very much, Lord Provost. Thinking about this, I'm genuinely not sure if this is a shambles that's become a farce or a farce that's become a shambles. But whatever it is, Lord Provost, it's a real mess. And the way in which the communities of East Craigs, North Gyle and Craigmount have been treated, I think is disgraceful. Lord Provost, first we had the Transport Convener deviate from a Spaces for People process that she told us couldn't be deviated from. And then she managed to get officials to change a scheme which she had previously said couldn't be changed before it was implemented. And now the administration is delaying the revised scheme, which just 2 weeks ago she said couldn't be delayed. In fact, she laid into me and other opposition councillors at the committee for a 2-week referral to council, when today she's proposing her own delay of up to a month. It's little wonder that the communities who have been affected by all of this have unquestionably lost any confidence that existed in this process. Because just look at what they have been forced to observe, Lord Provost. In August, the administration said the original LTN scheme was great. Then in September, the administration admitted that the original scheme wasn't, in fact, great, but the new revised scheme, well, that was great. And now here we are in October, and the administration is admitting, oh, well, the revised scheme might not be great, as it might not even be legal. And taking a bigger look at this, meanwhile, valuable officer time and resource is being sucked up into this, whilst a pile of simple changes to make it easier for pedestrians and cyclists, changes which were proposed in the consultation back in May, changes which people in our communities were telling us that they actually wanted, they're sitting unactioned, piled high, gathering virtual dust on some to-do list. And here is the most ridiculous thing, Lord Provost. In the time that has passed since the scheme was first mooted, and the time that will pass by the time of the next Transport Committee, we could have actually had a public consultation. We could have had the time to have gone out and worked with the community and asked them what they wanted and what they thought, because it has been 4 months where the council could have done what it should have done, gone out and worked with the community to develop solutions. So, Lord Provost, whether it is a shambles that's become a farce or a farce that's become a shambles, the important thing now is to pause, and to also rebuild what I think is a shattered relationship between this local authority and the people of this community. So I second the Liberal Democrat amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Before I go on to call members to make contributions, officers have asked me to, I'll just read out what they've sent me. Just saying, Lord Provost, can you please just let members know that the Council has received a formal legal challenge from an individual via a law firm, which has asked us to make members aware of this. However, given no decision to approve is sought today, this is for information only. There we go. Having said that, can I now call on Councillor Bridgman for a contribution?
Thank you, Lord Provost. Like my fellow ward councillors, I too am completely committed to ensuring that my ward and the city is a safer and healthier place to live, and fully support their contributions today. I would like to take this opportunity also to thank the amazing residents of my ward for their fortitude and determination. And it's important that we focus on the residents. After all, we have a duty of care to them and are responsible to them. Everyone has been impacted by COVID. Sadly, rather than the intention of the legislation to improve this and to make the area a safer and healthier place, the reality of how the LTN is being implemented is having the opposite effect. For those councillors who have stated that their party's intention is to prioritise the health and well-being of our residents, your actions are having the polar opposite effect. We have all received a deluge of emails clearly stating the untold stress and upset from people living in the area. If the LTN proceeds, journeys will be longer and pollution will be increased. These are the simple facts of the matter. Thousands of residents are saying loudly and clearly that these plans and the way this process is being managed is causing a huge amount of stress and impacting their mental health. So if you're voting for the proposal on the basis of health, you have only one option: not to support the implementation of the LTN. Having said this, as the Lord Provost has just highlighted, the crux of today's vote is that we have a respected legal opinion stating that the administration, with the support of the Greens and what they're intending to do, and I quote, is prima facie unlawful. As councillors, we are all well aware that we must make decisions on merit, and clearly to proceed with these proposals is not only unlawful, but also against our code of standards. We have no option but to halt these plans. Sending this back to the Tech Committee is simply postponing the only outcome that we can come to. And to quote my ward colleague, Councillor Brown, halt and consult. Finally, I ask all coalition colleagues to take their responsibilities as councillors seriously. Follow the example of your enlightened colleagues last month and do the right thing for the city and our residents and abstain. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Lord Provost. I was going to make a contribution today because the Green Amendment that we put forward at the Transport and Environment Committee is included in the recommendations of the paper that we've got today. So obviously our group would continue to support that. And in terms of the amendments that we've got in front of us, our group is also intending to support the coalition amendment as adjusted by Councillor McInnes at the beginning of the debate. Because in response to that deputation from the resident group, which included, quite technical legal opinions that obviously we do need to understand and make sure that we get independent advice on, we have to make sure that we're certain on those things before we take action to introduce any temporary measures. And in terms of our views on this issue, I just want to sort of start, I suppose, with a personal story. I think these are quite unusual times. Yesterday, I found myself swabbing my tonsils in a booth in the foyer of the Usher Hall, which is something which I never thought I would find myself doing. It was a new and altogether quite a weird experience. I've got a cold right now, and thankfully this morning I've been sent my test results and I am negative. I don't have COVID, but the NHS provides that walk-through testing for us if we develop a cough or any of the other symptoms. And among us, the sort of 22,000 and odd people who are getting test results a day in Scotland just now, some of us will test positive for COVID. So what does that have to do with low traffic neighbourhoods? Well, the Scottish Government provided a fund to Sustrans, who have awarded funding to this and other councils to implement what they're calling Space for People. The fund is restricted in terms of what we are able to spend this money on. It's temporary infrastructure, and it's to make it safer for people who choose to walk, cycle or wheel for their essential trips and exercise during COVID. It's not money from this council's existing budgets. It's additional money that we have been awarded by the Scottish Government to implement COVID-related measures on a temporary basis. The Transport Scotland advice on their website gives general advice to all residents of Scotland to follow lots of different steps in order to protect the safety of everybody in the country. And there are a lot more details on their website, which I would recommend checking out if you don't completely understand why Transport Scotland is giving travel advice in a pandemic. But here are some of the points which I think are most important. Consider walking, wheeling or cycling if you can, to reduce pressure on the road network and on public transport where capacity will be limited. Plan your journey and leave additional time due to temporary measures or changes to previous timetables and schedules, and stay local as much as possible for goods, services and activities, and continue to work from home where you can. So basically what they're doing is they are saying stay local, try to use active travel, and really genuinely live your lives slightly differently so that we can protect everybody's public health. And that is the purpose of these measures. So I feel quite strongly, and I need to really emphasise that the misinformation which has been broadcast about these measures being permanent, and the fact that there are not COVID-related measures is a real problem. And I would really like to challenge elected members on spreading that kind of misinformation, because the funding we have got from Spaces for People is absolutely categorically to deliver these objectives that Transport Scotland are asking us all to achieve. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you, Lord Provost. When we discussed this matter at the Transport and Environment Committee, councillors, Conservative councillors, other opposition councillors asked for an update on the legal position, given the letters that had been sent in and the external legal advice that had been given to people who were objecting to the scheme. At that point, we were told not to worry about that. This was all legal. The council had looked at it. The council had the powers to do all of this. Well, we now find the council has some concern about it, and we now find apparently there's a legal challenge to it. And none of us have had the ability to check what the council's own legal advice in response to that is. So Councillor McInnes, who told us off for suggesting that we have further discussion on this at full council, should really be thanking the Conservative group, because what we did that day was move it to full council for a further debate, specifically so that ward councillors could contribute, and I'd like to thank all 3 ward councillors who've contributed excellently to this debate today. And that has allowed some clarification, I hope. And we're now going to go back to Transport Committee. But at the time, it was dismissed out of hand. I think Councillor McInnes should be thanking Conservative councillors for continuing this matter to full council, because otherwise she'd have just gone ahead and implemented this scheme and been up against legal challenges for overstepping the powers of the council. That's the first part of what I want to say. The second part is there is at least some victory for our approach, because our approach was to say you have to start listening to people. Well, some of that will be listening through the courts, it seems. But we need to have a clear position. And regardless of that, we need to find out what people actually want in their community and then implement that. That means a full consultation. That means working with people and taking them with you. That means making sure that, as Councillor Brown said earlier, we stop and consult. If we take this back to Transport Committee, it shouldn't be just to fix the legals. It should be to fix the whole thing. Let's end this mess, Lord Provost. Let's not force something through on the pretext of temporary measures for an emergency, which is really about a fundamental change to traffic in an area of the city that people don't want. Let's get this right. Let's take the public with us if we're going to be a council that implements matters. But we'll see if that's what this administration will change and take on board. Thank you.
Councillor Doggett.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I think, first of all, it would be appropriate to pay tribute to the local community for the participation in democracy that has been shown over the last few months, last few weeks, and the time that they've taken on both sides of the argument to get in touch with councillors. Lord Provost, it's important that the council acts in an appropriate manner. It's important that the council, as the Chief Executive referred to in the first item of debate today, that the policies that we've got in place that are reviewed, that we also stick to those policies. So, Lord Provost, I wonder if I can take you back and everyone else listening to this, to the last Policy and Sustainability Committee, where the members of that committee unanimously approved the risk appetite for the council. Now, I'm aware that Councillor McInnes sits on that committee, and I'm aware that Councillor McInnes voted to accept that risk appetite. One of the risks that's described in that is regulatory and legislative compliance, and the commentary to that says the following. The Council aims to comply with applicable regulatory and legislative requirements to the fullest extent possible. All well and good. Number 2. No officer or elected member may knowingly take or recommend decisions or actions which breach legislation. Now, I have no idea whether any officer or whether any elected member knowingly knew that the recommendation that was being made in respect of the low traffic neighbourhood was in breach of legislation. That is for them to examine their own consciences. However, the most important part in respect of this, and this is perhaps where the whole piece falls apart, is number 3. Executive directors and heads of service are expected to implement appropriate controls to ensure ongoing compliance and identify, report and resolve breaches when they occur. It is absolutely clear by the administration's amendment today, in terms of delaying this, that there were no appropriate controls implemented to ensure whether the low traffic neighbourhood proposal for East Craigs was legal. That is a fundamental breach of what was agreed at Policy and Sustainability, and indeed is no change to what had been agreed in the past. So immediately we have a position where the administration is breaching something that was agreed at Policy and Sustainability. Now, the key question there, Lord Provost, is it just in respect of the low traffic proposal at East Craigs, or is it the whole spaces for people process that is illegal? And it would be very helpful if the convener could confirm that she does have legal opinion that the whole spaces for people project has been in accordance with all legislation. Otherwise, the convener and indeed many officers who have been involved in these recommendations are in breach of the risk framework that was agreed last week, and is indeed bringing discredit to the council for not following that policy. I would be grateful if the convener can confirm that.
Conclude.
I will, but this is an important issue. If we agree these policies, we must implement them and we must adhere to them, and it would be great to have that confirmation that we are indeed doing what we said we would do.
Okay, virtually every member that's spoken so far has gone over standing order time. We've got a lot on the agenda today. I must ask members, you're all capable of timing yourselves. It's 3 minutes maximum for a contribution. I would ask members, I've still got more than 10 members to speak on this topic alone. We've got a huge agenda today. This council meeting will finish at 7 p.m. this evening. And if we haven't concluded the business, we will reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. So I would ask members to respect standing orders and time themselves so that I'm not having to constantly interrupt people. Councillor Glower.
Thank you, Lord Provost. After that rather scary introduction, I'll speak quickly. Quite rightly, we've heard a lot about the proposals for East Craigs, but I wanted to focus on the suggestion which has been snuck in towards the end of the report before us today to introduce a so-called temporary low-traffic neighbourhood in the Feather Hall area in Corstorphine. Lord Provost, for other members who may not be as familiar as you are with Feather Hall, for their benefit, I should explain that unlike East Craigs, Feather Hall Avenue really does suffer from rat running. Indeed, this area might have been a better candidate than East Craigs for the administration's obsession with introducing the first low-traffic neighbourhood in Scotland. Corstorphine Community Council and ward councillors, including yourself, Lord Provost, have been trying for years to find a solution. The most recent attempt was at the beginning of this year, and I was one of those that supported a trial, a genuine trial, not a year and a half, but a couple of weeks, of what we were then calling filtered permeability. Perhaps we should have called it a low traffic neighbourhood, because it's the same thing. Unlike this administration, the Community Council consulted the residents about this proposed short 2-3 week trial. It wasn't a great consultation. It was done too hastily. I don't think the proposals were properly explained, but at least people were asked for their views. And to our surprise, Lord Provost, given the long-standing traffic problems in the area, the overwhelming majority of the views that were expressed were negative. The Community Council then decided to pause the trial so that the plans could be revised, and then COVID intervened. No revised plans were circulated. The residents haven't been consulted again. But this makes it even more astonishing that this administration is proposing to use its emergency powers to steamroller through low traffic neighbourhood plans for Feather Hall, despite clearly expressed opposition to them. And Lord Provost, if your colleagues persist in this, I can guarantee you and the administration that the result will be the same as we've seen in East Craigs, a huge local campaign against the proposals, bitter polarisation across the community. I beg the administration to learn from its mistakes in East Craigs and use standard procedures with proper community consultation for all its low traffic neighbourhood proposals, starting with East Craigs but continuing with the others that are in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glower, for sticking to time as well. Thank you. Excellent example for others to follow you. Councillor McVeigh.
Thank you, Lord Provost, and I too will speak quickly. I think some opposition members must have heard a very different introduction than I did to this report. And I have to say I have been disappointed by the tone substantially from opposition members on this. I can't imagine if you're one of the people who have emailed me, and to be fair, it is in the minority of correspondence, but the parents who have emailed to support measures, the people who have lived in East Craigs for 40 years who have emailed in support, they have had no voice today from their local members because their local members have sided with the majority view, and perhaps they have justification in doing that, but they have not voiced any of those people's aspirations as well as the concerns of the residents, and both are important. The way Councillor McGuinness set this out was to continue the dialogue which has already taken place. There has been dialogue, there has been changes to the scheme, and that was the basis of the second iteration which went to committee, which had changes in it. We need to continue that engagement, and that's what Councillor McInnes set out very clearly, and we will continue that engagement. We have seen, and it follows on from Councillor Miller's contribution, some fairly misleading comments made. Councillor Dogger said this scheme was illegal. That has not been established yet, and I don't think that is actually true. I think members should try and at least stick to facts. And Councillor Bridgman states that the project is being taken forward. It isn't. The amendment put forward by the administration is very clear on the way forward on this, and it's important that people stick to truths rather than deviating from that. I don't think that's particularly helpful to this debate. I think our responsibility as elected members is to try and find a way forward that meets local aspirations and deal with concerns, and that's exactly what I heard Councillor McInnes set out at the start of this debate.
Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. Councillor Arthur.
Sorry, thank you, Lord Provost. You almost caught me there. So I welcome the change in tone we've got from the Council administration on this. And I think it is worth remembering that whilst people in East Craigs do have concerns about the extent of the consultation, there's no doubt that there's been more consultation on this Spaces for People project than any other in the city, and that consultation has led to improvements. I'm not saying it's a gold standard. I can see a few people shaking their heads, but there has been more consultation on this scheme than there is any other in the city. And I also welcome the fact that the council is now getting its own legal advice on this. Because people, I think, right, I mean, it's worth remembering that Spaces for People projects, there's been many projects promoted and are on the ground, and quite a lot of these have been received quite well, and even aspects of the ones which have not been welcomed, there has been parts of them that people absolutely do appreciate. And I mean, I live just off Comiston Road, lots of concerns about that scheme, but the vast majority of people welcome that it's come with a reduction in the speed limit. One of the issues we have around this is that the schemes are promoted within the context of the COVID crisis, but many of the benefits which are reported don't immediately relate to the COVID crisis as far as residents are concerned. And often it's what I called the other day, the blast zone around the projects, which does really generate public concern. Great example is the quiet route, which has been promoted through Morningside just now. I don't know anybody who's against that, but where opposition is growing is in the add-ons around the project, and people say, what is the legal basis for this road getting closed or that intervention, when they don't really see the immediate connection with COVID. Likewise, nearby Braid Road, it was closed way back, at the peak of the lockdown. It was closed because of the sheer numbers of people trying to access the Hermitage. Things have moved on, so people regularly contact me and say, what is the rationale within the COVID crisis for continuing that closure? So I really hope that the request for legal advice is a prompt for the council when it's thinking about these schemes to be very clear about what the link is to the COVID crisis. And Councillor Miller spoke quite clearly about what she feels the links are there. And I really think the council has a duty to really explain why COVID powers are needed to promote these schemes. And I think that might reduce some of the concerns around the project. Thank you very much, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Arthur. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Lord Provost, and I hope you can hear me. My headset doesn't seem to want to work today, and hopefully my laptop won't play up either. I just wanted to say, similarly to my contribution at Tech, thank you to everybody directly who has been in touch to air a number of views and a range of views, opinions, positions and lived experiences. We are listening and we do understand the strength of feeling, but I am also cognizant, as has already been mentioned, of the unheard voices, and this council clearly does pride itself on exploring them too. So there are mixed views to these temporary measures, and they all have to have space to be heard and to be recognised. And of course, these temporary measures cannot be seen in isolation, but within other frameworks within which we work. And I did speak at Transport and Environment about, in particular, the impact on our children and young people during the What Kind of Edinburgh work, which was massively underpinned by the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. It came up on a number of occasions throughout those sessions, children's worries about cars and the direct impact that the intimidation of the physicality of cars had on them, but also the disproportionate impact that pollution has on them too. And we know that. As our motion mentioned, the original decision included the proposal close selected roads to enable local trips to be made, especially to parks and schools. That is central to this. And I know local school active travel plans are iterative and organic and will have a massive role to play here, and there is already very good work going on there. Clearly, initial plans have changed to reflect responses, and traffic calming measures are being explored in some locations. And there will never be one view, we understand that, but as our role in the council and as councillors is to find the best way forward, both locally for the local community, but also strategically for the citywide. And I think Councillor Aldridge mentioned personal lives, but I'm sure he'll accept and understand that the personal has to be balanced with the social here, and that is why this is not an easy exercise. We have a responsibility as a council to do that, and I would be concerned that some of our colleagues' contributions today do potentially risk oversimplifying this process, which is not simple. So as I've said, we've got multiple pressures that we have to recognise and balance: climate change, COVID, and vitally, the importance of the well-being, both physical and mental well-being of our citizens, all of our citizens. It was clearly very central to us as a council, a theme that came up in our budget, and that is rooted in everything that we do. But this is an unprecedented time, and it requires an unprecedented response, in particular, in my view, to the well-being of our citizens. And it's important that we remember our responsibility to that and prioritise that. This process has already been agreed by PNS, and scrutiny clearly will follow. So I fully support the coalition amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Lord Provost. And I support the motion with the coalition amendment as adjusted. And in doing so, I wanted to touch on a couple of issues. Firstly, on the very exciting proposals for the Leith low traffic neighbourhood, which are briefly mentioned in the report. And secondly, to pick up the theme that Councillor Bird raised there, is to try to address this question: who are the spaces for people projects and low traffic neighbourhoods for? So firstly, in terms of the Leith proposals, I warmly welcome these, and I've had a number of positive comments on these proposals from constituents. I'm jealous of the people of East Craigs, who will apparently be benefiting from cleaner air, reduced congestion and more pleasant streets before the people of Leith, but I hope that Leith won't be far behind. I hope that in drawing up the proposals for Leith, that officers can ensure that we make use of bus gates or other measures to maintain good bus links through the area. And crucially, I also hope that we can use the opportunity to join up one of the key missing links in the traffic-free path network from the Water of Leith to Leith Links. Completing this section could unlock a much wider network, potentially from Cramond to Joppa, and it would be a significant achievement. In terms of who are these measures for, I mean, some people have contacted me to say that they already cycle or walk, and that spaces for people measures will make no difference to how safe they feel doing that during COVID. Interestingly, the majority of people who've said that are white, male adults. And while it's great to hear that some people feel safe cycling and walking, there's very strong evidence that many people do not feel safe cycling and walking on our streets. Women are 50% less likely to cycle than men in the UK. Members of ethnic minorities, disabled people are less likely to cycle, and children are much less likely to cycle to school or on other trips than children in many other countries. UNICEF run a regular report card on children's health and well-being around the world, and the kids from the Netherlands regularly top the list as the happiest and the healthiest. There are many reasons for this, but crucial among them is that Dutch kids spend more time exercising outside and have more independence. And that is because the infrastructure is in place to ensure that they can walk and cycle safely, segregated from motor traffic. Lord Provost, I think we should aim for happier, healthier kids. I think we should aim for a child-friendly city, and the proposals set out today are a big step towards that. That's why I support them.
Thank you, Councillor Booth. Councillor Jim Campbell.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I'm going to start by agreeing with a small part of what Councillor Booth just said, and that's about encouraging children to use active travel to get to and from school. And I would draw his attention to answer 13 on today's order paper, where the convener of the Education Committee points out that the plans to provide active travel to school have been delayed because of lack of resources and commitments to other projects. And I would ask the convener of the Transport Committee to reflect on that answer, and perhaps if she stopped pushing ahead with the low traffic neighbourhood in East Craigs, some of those resources could be reassigned to putting plans in place around our schools. I see Councillor Booth is shaking his head. I've no idea why. Lord Provost, the main point I wish to touch on is the legal advice. I understand the Council sought independent legal advice the day before the Transport Environment Committee met. I understand the Council received independent legal advice a couple of days after that. We have the legal advice already. Any councillor could have found out what that legal advice was by contacting our legal services. We already have it. The legal advice is quite clear. The contention of the objectors is accurate. Their council's opinion is valid. For us to proceed with these plans would subject the council to massive legal risk and challenge. We already know that. We're already being challenged. It's a great regret that the convener did not listen to the views of opposition councillors at the Transport Environment Committee, and neither did the Green councillors, that we should assess the legal position. The legal position is clear. You cannot introduce low traffic neighbourhoods using the emergency arrangements. If you wish to pursue them in Leith or in other areas, they have to go through the normal statutory process. Stop wasting time, stop upsetting communities, and understand the legal position. And why on earth councillors have not checked this by contacting our legal services is beyond me. It's very, very simple. Know your facts. Thank you, Lord Provost. You might wish to ask why that advice has not been shared with all councillors prior to this item on the agenda at Council today.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Thanks, Lord Provost. I just wanted to, first of all, start off by thanking the many residents that have been getting in touch. I mean, sitting on planning and regulatory for as long as I have, I've never received so much correspondence about anything, no matter what planning application there's been, no matter what HMO application there has been. Honestly, it's been quite incredible. It's just, I want to sort of respond to different things that have been said. What Councillor McInnes said in terms of, I've got a meeting tomorrow and I'm going to explain to the residents, with the council leader and the vice convener as well. Explain what? Explain why the residents are wrong. The residents that live in East Craigs and Craigmount, explain why they don't understand their own area, the area in which they live, they work in, they travel in with their children, take their children to school. No need to shake councillors to shake their heads at me. But then what is this delay actually going to achieve as well? Because nothing will change. It's still going to be an explanation of why these residents are wrong. And it's... So I'm just slightly perplexed as to what. So regardless of public opinion, we're still going to end up giving the residents exactly what they don't want. There are of course, perhaps half a dozen or so residents that have been getting in touch with all of us. I think we've all been CC'd in them, supporting them, but the vast majority are against them. Councillor Bird talked about, we are listening. To who? The minority, or is there a silent majority that we haven't quite heard yet? I think that's I'm so concerned at the way that the council's approaching all of this, and that no matter what residents, no matter what local businesses say, you are wrong. That is what the council is saying to these people, and I'm so deeply uncomfortable with that. And as Councillor Webber said earlier, I think that some of us need to have a good look at ourselves. I think I will just end there. Thank you very much, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I just wanted to touch on the points a couple of people made about this being about misinformation. Firstly, I think that's quite frankly offensive to the many people who've emailed in to imply that they don't understand what the scheme is or does. And second of all, I think it misses the point entirely. This isn't about misinformation about LTNs. It's about asking people in this area about what they want for it. So my rather brief point I'd like to make is that rather than making banal contributions about COVID testing, maybe councillors should read some of the hundreds of emails in their inboxes from residents who are fed up at having this administration tell them what's best for their area and just simply want to be asked about the changes that are in the end going to affect them the most.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Douglas. Councillor Corbett.
Thanks very much, Lord Provost. And I wanted to reflect just a wee bit on the context for the debate today, which is about how we change the balance between motor vehicles and other ways of getting around, like people walking, pushing buggies, wheelchairs, mobility scooters and bikes. We know that the term low traffic neighbourhoods might be a new one, but the changes under that term are as commonplace and have been for decades. Now, as I highlighted at committee, and as I know my ward colleagues, Councillors Key and Johnson, will recognise, in the area that we represent, Hutchison Crossway, Cheshire Crescent, Cheshire Gardens, Craiglockhart Road North, Craiglockhart Gardens and other locations, there are already measures in place to reduce motor vehicles while still allowing free passage through for people walking, wheeling or bikes. They've been in place for decades. And when the new development at Sidings Way in the old fruit market was built, filter permeability was part of the design without a peep of dissent. This is the case throughout the city. There are dozens of neighbourhoods where roads have been changed to reduce through traffic or where newly built developments have been created with that in the design. And how many of these neighbourhoods would residents campaign for these features to be taken away now? In all of these neighbourhoods, emergency vehicles still get access, carers still care, deliveries still happen, and daily lives continue. So the label low traffic neighbourhood might be new, the label might be new, but the idea is both familiar and commonplace. When residents see the change it makes to traffic levels, speeds, air pollution, community interaction, and just normal street life, they're popular. Now, that doesn't mean that all designs are equally good, of course, but it does mean that we all, and I do mean all, have a duty to engage in a debate which draws on those decades of experience of seeking to reduce traffic levels. And I take it as read the sincerity of every member when we collectively agree to wanting a city with less pollution, fewer vehicle movements, more people able to walk, wheel and cycle. And I simply hope that we're able to have a discussion which serves rather than belittles those end goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Whitmore.
Thank you, Lord Provost. The focus of today's debate has to be and should be, given the volume of correspondence around East Craigs, the people of that community and the proposals on the table. And I think, we've seen in this debate it has moved back and forward from the significant objections of that community to the concept of whether or not we should be looking at reducing congestion and introducing low traffic measures across our city. I think that is the crux of the problem we face. I'm sure many of us would agree. Councillor Boyer talked about Featherhall Road, Councillor Booth talked about areas in Leith, that there are areas in the city where we might want to reduce car use, we might want to use traffic and redirect traffic. And I have areas in my own ward, I'm sure we all do. But it is very clear that that in East Craigs, the majority of people are not on board with the proposals. The proposals have been forced through in a way that is confusing, that has used different types of legislation to effectively remove the community having a say and to be a sort of petri dish experiment. And I think also most notably in a council ward that perhaps the Synod Committee says doesn't have administration councillors. And I think that has given the community a sense that they are not being listened to in the way that other communities across the city might be. So I think it is maddening in a way that the council is choosing in some respects to die in a ditch with these proposals. Yes, there has been a bit of backtracking. Yes, there's obviously this legal advice to move forward with something that's possibly illegal. Seems particularly crazy at this point in time. But what we are really doing here is putting the council once more on the back foot. I'm sure there are proposals across the city that are of merit, that people do want to see put forward, but we have to demonstrate in a democratic institution as the council body is, that we are listening to communities, and communities that really are not on board with proposals where it will affect them, be detrimental to them, are listened to. And today we have to focus on the voices we've heard from East Craigs. And that's why I'm very, very pleased to support the Conservative amendment on this, motion on this. And I think we all owe it to ourselves. If we want to see a city with less traffic, with better and safer streets, to make sure that we are doing so, listening to communities and moving forward in a way that really shows that we, as elected members, are representatives and are listening. And I just don't feel that is the case in East Craigs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Laidlaw. Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Provost. So I think that it's been extremely, unfortunate that at the time where we're trying to reduce traffic movement, that public transport has been, to a certain extent advised against. And I think that that's a very difficult issue that we maybe haven't properly addressed. I think that Councillor Booth raised another very important point, that women and girls are far less likely to cycle than men and boys, and we have to take that into consideration when we're looking at low traffic neighbourhoods and active travel. So I think that's two very important things. Overall, if I can move to why I'll be supporting the coalition position on this, I am very keen to see the council's legal advice on spaces for people. At the moment, what I've seen is a summary of legal advice provided by an activist that is against this project. So I've seen nothing that's directly from, I'm not casting any aspersions on that, but I very much want to see the proper legal advice on this, and I think that all councillors would agree with that, and that's why I think it's entirely appropriate to send it back to P&S until such time as we've all had an opportunity to see as much of both new sides of the legal advice as is available to us. So that's why I'll be supporting the coalition amendment. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. Thank you.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I think what the debate is showing is that councillors, some have seen legal advice, some have not seen legal advice, and in the previous debate around the whistleblowing, I made the point that it's important for all councillors to have access and be briefed on the information that's necessary. I was certainly surprised and expressed my surprise to the Director of Place that legal advice had not been sought in advance of doing anything regarding getting this project, this whole Spaces for People project, underway. I'm also aware that the Scottish Government had indicated that formal consultation was not needed. However, that's all very well for the Scottish Government to say that, but we as a council know and should be, don't have to follow that advice, and we ought to be being far more proactive. And just reflecting on some of the remarks I made in last council's debate on this, we cannot end up being polarised. We've got to move forward on this and accept and realise that things could and should have been handled a lot better. Lord Provost, you were kind enough to pause the meeting to advise us of the fact that Council has now received a formal legal challenge. That's right and proper. You've informed all of us at the same time. So that has to apply to everything around this and other key policy areas like this. All of us need to know and be in the loop on this so we can fulfil our duties and obligations as elected members. And it saddens me that that isn't and hasn't happened, and I hope that that will change. The other point that concerned me around Spaces for People, again in response to a question to a senior officer, was the involvement and pre-work done with businesses across the city. I was really surprised that, again, it's a responsive, reactive way that the council and council officers are handling this. And again, businesses need to know that their supply chains, that as well as the blue light services, why was there no mechanism done to inform and involve businesses on the city as well? Because as we all know, with the pandemic, with Brexit, livelihoods, lives are at stake here. So this is a complex issue, but the basic steps of not clearing or seeking legal advice in advance to make sure that how the council approached the implementation of this doesn't seem to have been sought, and the legal advice such as the council has not been shared proactively, and that it certainly concerns me. I can only speak for me, but that certainly concerns me greatly. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I wasn't planning on speaking in this debate given the length it's already gone on, but I feel it's important to pick up on a couple of points which have been made. I'd like to thank the residents of East Craigs, first of all, for all the emails that they have sent in, not a copy and paste standard response from pressure groups, but individual stories about how these proposed changes will impact their everyday lives. Councillor Arthur mentioned in his contribution there would be more consultation on these plans than there had been on any of our spaces for people proposals. There's been no consultation, no proper consultation whatsoever on these plans, where residents have raised objections. These have simply been ignored and the administration has ploughed on regardless. Councillor Watt referred to the legal advice as having come from an activist. The legal advice came from a lawyer, Councillor Watt, not from an activist. And then, following on from that, there was comment just made there as part of a contribution saying about the legal advice not having been seen by all councillors. The legal advice that Councillor Webber referred to in proposing our motion was circulated as part of the deputation this morning. And as you said, Lord Provost, at the start, I would have hoped that all councillors would have read these before engaging in this debate. This is a significant piece of work, a significant change for the neighbourhood in East Craigs if these plans were implemented. We should be sitting here as councillors discussing the merit of the plans. Instead, we are having to discuss the appalling anti-democratic way in which this has been foisted upon people, and the fact that due process hasn't been followed. There's overreach here by the administration in terms of the spaces for people process, and as we've heard several times already, the council has been put in a position where it came very close, were it not for the Conservative councillors referring this matter to full council, to doing something which is entirely illegal. I support the Conservative motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchison. Councillor Main.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I wanted to pick up on a couple of points that have been made. Councillor Mitchell suggested that residents are being told that they are wrong. I think that language is really unhelpful. I mean, and it really disappoints me. I've read a lot of the comments that have come through in our emails. Yes, we've had very many, not as many as for some other planning issues or whatever in the past, but very many comments. And there's many constructive suggestions there. And what I have found very difficult to understand is why the councillors have not taken those constructive comments forward to officers and built these into what is coming forward in East Craigs. It's not my ward, and I really don't understand why we've got to this point. I think it's very disappointing. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what Spaces for People is about, and as Councillor Miller has alluded and explained. But I'd like to pick up on Councillor Arthur also said that the quiet route going through Morningside ward, that no one is against that, and that includes a low traffic neighbourhood. However, he's not quite right. About a month ago, there was a very ill-informed, misleading political blog about the route, the quiet route in Morningside. And that did generate objections, immediate objections, quite rightly. But when people were then written to and explained what the actual situation was, and the facts were put to the people, there have been no more objections to that route coming to my inbox, or as far as I'm aware, to anyone else's. And overwhelmingly, the support is for that quiet route with a low traffic neighbourhood. And the comments that are coming to us are mainly from parents where the route is going to pass. And they are very pleased to see a route that will give them the confidence to allow their children to walk and cycle to school, to allow them to take them to school sustainably, and then move on to where their work or wherever else they're going. And they're very clear that during the pandemic, that allows them to follow the government guidelines and use sustainable transport It may take a bit longer, but they are following that and they're keen to see it. And I think we have to go forward and appreciate that constructive engagement from everyone is what we really need to see going forward. I'm very sorry that the people of East Craigs are up in arms about this. I don't understand how the situation has been handled in such a way that we have got to this point. And I really hope that by going back to the Transport and Environment Committee, we can deal with these questions and we can lay it out very simply and come to a proposal that is acceptable to everyone. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Main. Councillor Rust.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I moved a motion at last month's full council which expressed concerns that specific substantive schemes and measures are being brought in across the city by the council over a period of months, utilising emergency legislative powers despite significant opposition from residents and communities which the council is here to serve. East Craigs LTN was one of those referenced. I sought agreement that change is best delivered through collaboration with local communities which are impacted by decisions taken. It recognised this will impact on the Spaces for People programme in a positive way, building support for active travel that is likely to endure and ensuring schemes are transparent and of public validity. That didn't happen. No SNP or Labour or Green Council felt able to support this approach. Instead, the decision was to reiterate the approach the Council has taken to date, and we are where we are today, along with the added confusion around the legal situation, and now we know there is a formal legal challenge. It is a fiasco and serious reputational damage is being done to the Council with these unpopular, ill-thought-out proposals, completely contrary to our democratic tradition. Please listen to the residents of East Craigs, to my colleague Councillor Mark Brown and his ward colleagues, and halt these proposals now. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Rust. Councillor Bruce.
Thank you, Lord Provost. Like all councillors, my inbox is full with residents' anger and frustration with an SNP-led administration that simply don't want to consult, but would rather dictate to residents what they think is good for them. Absolute disgrace. Having lived in East Craigs for over 5 years a number of years ago, I know how difficult it is already to get about where necessary by car in this area. This isn't about spaces for people. It's about making it harder and harder for people to go about their daily lives, whether that be work or leisure. The stress and anxiety these residents are facing is quite simply unacceptable. Bottom line is this SNP-led administration have not consulted. This administration need to get back to the drawing board and actually listen. I repeat, listen to the residents of East Craigs. End of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bruce. Now, Councillor Watt has indicated, Councillor Hutchison did name her and did specifically refer to a comment she made. Standing Order 21.8 doesn't exist. It's actually 22.8 under the interim standing orders. I will allow Councillor Watt to come back in on that very specific point and on no other.
Thank you, Provost. Yes, I believe Councillor Hutchison mischaracterised what I said. I said that the legal advice, I want to be very clear, that only legal advice that I had received, yes, had been a summary sent via an activist who was, against the project. That's what I've received, and I was very clear about that, and I actually said that I was not casting aspersions on it. Therefore, I think that Councillor Hutchison completely misconstrued and mischaracterised what I'd said. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. And just for clarity, it's Lord Provost as the position, Councillor Watt. You do seem to make that mistake on a regular basis. Councillor Mowat.
I apologise.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I believe that there is a composite Liberal Democrat and Conservative motion that has been put together behind the scenes whilst the debate has been going on. Now, I do not have absolute details of what is in and what is out, although I believe that 1.2 is coming out of the Conservative amendment is coming out. So I wonder if one of those who's been involved in putting it together could perhaps be brought in just to clarify what exactly that is, Lord Provost. I think that's the quickest way to do this, rather than me waiting to get a message in as I'm speaking.
Fine. We're actually at the point of breaking for lunch at this moment, so people will have 30 minutes to review. I do believe the amended document has been circulated to everybody now, so we will have 30 minutes to review that before we come back. While I appreciate the point, Councillor Moore, I think we've got enough time to review that properly. So we will. I have no other speakers at this moment in time, so we'll break for lunch now for 30 minutes, and we will come back. We'll have that position just explained to us by the officers, and then I'll go to the convener for the right of reply. Okay, thank you. Okay, good afternoon. Welcome back to this afternoon's session of the Council. We finished up just hearing that there was a combined amendment. So, Gavin, could you just enlighten members as to where we are with that?
Yes, so we have a combined amendment between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats that has been circulated to members. I am aware, though, that it has 9 paragraphs, of which there would have been 12, including the Conservative and Liberal Democrats. So I wonder if it would be helpful if someone from one of those groups outlined exactly what was included in this new merged amendment.
Absolutely. It'd be useful to know just what's been taken out, just for clarity. I know everybody's had 30 minutes, but we also had to get lunch, etc. Is there somebody from the Conservative group or Liberal?
I'm here, Lord Provost. Councillor Webber.
Yes, Councillor Webber, recognise your voice. If you can just let us know what's been taken out of the 2.
What's been taken out is 1.2, where it refers it back to full council because of the component from the Liberal Democrat amendment that refers it to tech. So the 2 of them, impossible to work. And we've actually removed also our 1.3 and just used the wording that's in the Liberal Democrat number 4. And then everything else is just slotted in.
Okay.
Accordingly. So that's all. Does that make sense?
It does indeed, and very clear. Thank you very much, Councillor Webber. Okay, and everybody's had that, which is fine. So in which case we'll move to right of reply. Councillor McInnes.
Thank you very much, Lord Provost. One of the frustrations of the way in which these debates run is the fact that we have a very limited time to respond to all of the points that are brought forward. And so I'm not going to have enough time to address all of the points that have been raised during this debate. But I must say I'm somewhat disappointed that we haven't been able to find some degree of common ground, which is what I started with right at the top of this debate, in an attempt to find a useful way forward on this. I've also been somewhat disappointed by the tone, the description of process and the level of inaccuracies contained in some contributors' comments, particularly in relation to how we've gone about doing things, about the administration motivation in doing this, and the sort of generalised comments about our approach. I will, however, take the time to do 2 things. And one of them is to describe the origins of Spaces for People, obviously where this project has emerged from, and clearly concentrate on not only the reason for it, which is quite clearly in response to COVID-19, quite clearly a set of emergency measures. And we've been told repeatedly that that is not the basis for this project. I'm telling you now, it always was, and it still remains to be the case, remains so. And that we agreed at Council the basis of moving forward on Spaces for People. The way in which we approached the low traffic neighbourhood in particular, and some of the other wider, larger schemes within Spaces for People, sits within that original agreement. So the comments that we've had today about us stepping outside of process and not doing things properly are somewhat difficult to hear. We've also promised to review. We've also promised to try then modify. All of those are established aspects of the way in which we're moving forward as Spaces for People. And in fact, we've seen it across some of the other projects that fall within this area to where we've made alterations and modifications as we've gone. I want to do a second thing though, which is that I want to promise the local community that, as we have done up until now, we have engaged with their concerns, we have responded through revised proposals, we will continue that engagement and our processes attached to that, so that we can truly understand what will become acceptable to the community and what would not. I've read every email that's come in. There have been some very constructive comments within those emails, and those looking at how we can improve conditions for the local residents. And I think that that's only right and proper that that's reflected. As we go forward to Transport and Environment, as I hope we will do at the end of this vote, we will be coming back with a better understanding of both the legal position and where that takes us. And we will understand better what the possibilities are around this particular item within the Spaces for People and for the community at large. It will be another opportunity for detailed scrutiny, for the questioning of officers, for the unpacking of some of the details attached to this particular project, and I, for one, welcome that that's the case. I think it's only right and proper that we do take it back to allow that degree of scrutiny to be undertaken. And on that note, I think I shall leave any of the other commentary about that. I hope that when we take it forward to TEC, that we will have an opportunity to address some of the concerns that have been raised today in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McInnes. Gavin, take us to the vote, please.
Thank you, Lord Provost. So yes, we're here at 8.5, the Spaces for People, East Craigs low traffic neighbourhood. We originally had a coalition motion moved by Councillor McInnes, seconded by Councillor Doran. This is now accepted. 1.1 and 1.6 of the Conservative amendment and paragraph 1 of the Liberal Democrat amendment. We had before a Conservative amendment moved by Councillor Webber, seconded by Councillor Brown, and a Liberal Democrat amendment moved by Councillor Aldridge, seconded by Councillor Lang. This has now been merged into one amendment for today. So, as said, we go to the vote. It'll be a roll call vote as usual, and we have the coalition motion, and then we have the combined Conservative and Liberal Democrat amendment. Lord Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Aldridge.
Amendment.
Councillor Arthur.
Councillor Arthur's text you his, I believe.
Great stuff. I was just checking. Yes, he's voting for the motion. Councillor Barry.
Amendment.
Councillor Bird.
Motion, please.
Councillor Booth.
Motion, please.
Councillor Bridgman.
Amendment, please.
Councillor Brown.
The amendment, please, Gavin.
Councillor Bruce.
Amendment, please.
Councillor Burgess.
Motion, please.
Councillor Cameron.
Motion, please.
Councillor Jim Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Kate Campbell.
Motion, please.
Councillor Mary Campbell.
Motion, please.
Councillor Child.
Motion, please.
Councillor Cook.
Amendment, please.
Councillor Corbett.
Motion.
Councillor Day. I think he's had to log out, so he's voting for the motion. Councillor Dickey.
Motion, please.
Councillor Dixon.
Motion, please.
Councillor Doggett.
Amendment.
Councillor Doran.
Motion, please.
Councillor Douglas.
Amendment.
I'm not sure Councillor Fullerton is here, but just in case she's logged on, I haven't noticed. Councillor Gardner.
Motion, please.
Councillor Gloyer.
Amendment.
Councillor Gordon.
Motion, please.
Councillor Gatchik.
Motion.
Councillor Griffiths.
Sorry, motion.
Councillor Henderson.
Motion.
Councillor Howie.
Motion.
Councillor Hutchison.
Amendment.
Councillor Johnson.
Amendment.
Councillor Key.
Motion, please.
Councillor Laidlaw.
Amendment, please.
Councillor Lyne.
Amendment.
Councillor McInnes.
Motion, please.
Councillor Main.
Motion, please.
Councillor McClellan.
Amendment.
Councillor McNeice-Meakin.
Motion, please.
Councillor McVeigh.
Motion, please.
Councillor Miller.
Motion.
Councillor Mitchell.
Amendment, please.
Councillor Mowat.
Amendment, please.
Councillor Munn.
Motion, please.
Councillor Munro.
Motion.
Councillor Osler.
Amendment, please, Gavin.
Councillor Perry.
Motion.
Councillor Ray.
For the motion, please.
Councillor Rose.
Amendment.
Councillor Neil Ross.
Amendment, please.
Thank you. Councillor Rust.
Amendment.
Councillor Smith.
Amendment, please.
Councillor Staniforth.
For the motion.
Councillor Watt.
Motion, please.
Councillor Webber.
Amendment, please.
Councillor White.
Amendment.
Councillor Wilson.
Motion, please.
Councillor Work.
Motion.
And Councillor Young.
Amendment.
That is 30 vote for the motion and 25 for the amendment. The motion is carried.